We have been waiting to have this conversation because this is the one that follows us everywhere. During the decades of this work, in conferences, in support groups, in conversations after our talks, there are always some doubts about some misinformation around attachment. The main question is that if you raise a child being responsive, close, attuned, do you end up with a child who can't function without you?
The polite version of this question sounds like, doesn't all that closeness create dependency? But the less polite version, the one we hear more often, sounds like this. You're raising children who will never leave home. You're building adults who cannot handle a hard day at work. You're so focused on making your child feel secure that you're forgetting to prepare them for the real world.
We've heard all of those, and we want to give you an extended perspective of what attachment parenting really is today. Over the years, we have seen research across multiple countries, following children from infancy into adulthood, studying, investigating. The information might be the opposite of what you would expect.
Before we get into the research, we want to acknowledge something. The fear behind this question is real and even common, and it makes sense if we're talking about an overindulgent parent. If you give a child everything they ask for, every toy, every candy, every moment of screen time, they probably will struggle to handle limits. That, of course, is very logical.
But that logic breaks down completely when we're talking about emotional needs from their perspective. What it feels like to be held, to be responded to when you're in distress, or to know that someone is reliably present. Isn't that what we all want, even as adults? These are the basic conditions for healthy development, and confusing them with overindulgence causes enormous amounts of unnecessary suffering.
You cannot teach a child to be independent by withholding love. This way, they only learn that love is unreliable. And a child who has learned that love is unreliable does not become more independent. They become more anxious, vigilant, and more afraid to let go, because letting go requires trusting that there's something solid to come back to.
Let's go into the research, because this question has been studied more carefully over a longer period of time than almost any other question in developmental psychology. It starts with a woman named Mary Ainsworth, who we mentioned in the previous video.
Mary Ainsworth was a developmental psychologist who worked alongside John Bowlby, the psychiatrist who first formalized attachment theory. In the 50s and 60s, she conducted a series of naturalistic studies, first in Uganda and then in the U.S. in Baltimore, Maryland, where she observed mothers and babies in their homes over months, just watching and noticing what happened.
What she noticed was something that sounds simple, but turned out to be enormously significant. Not all responsiveness looks the same. Some mothers were consistently sensitive to their baby's signals. Some were inconsistent, responsive sometimes, unavailable others. Some were predominantly unresponsive. And babies, they consistently reacted the same way to the different types of response, not just in temperament, but also in how they used their mothers, in what they did when they were frightened, in how they responded when their mother came back after a brief absence.
From those observations, Ainsworth developed what became one of the most replicated experiments in all of developmental psychology. She called it the strange situation.
The strange situation is a structured observation. A mother and her baby, typically around 12 months old, come into a room. It's an unfamiliar room with some toys. They explore together for a few minutes. Then a stranger enters. The mother stays. How does the baby respond? Then the mother leaves. The stranger stays. Now what happens? And then the mother comes back. And that, their reunion, is where everything becomes clear.
Ainsworth identified what she called secure attachment and several forms of insecure attachment, and the differences were significant.
The securely attached babies, the ones whose mothers had been consistently responsive at home, those babies explored freely when their mother was present. They were curious, engaged, willing to interact with toys and even with the stranger. When their mother left, they were distressed. They cried. They stopped exploring. And this is important. That response is completely normal and healthy. Separation from an attachment figure causes distress, basically because biology is working correctly.
And here is what matters. The moment when the mother comes back, the securely attached babies went to them and let themselves be comforted. And then within a few minutes, they went back to exploring. They recovered. They used their mother as a base to refuel from. And then they went back out.
The insecurely attached babies were different. Some of them, the ones whose mothers had been mostly unresponsive, barely reacted when the mothers left. And when she came back, they ignored her or they moved away. Not because they did not care. The research shows their stress hormones were just as elevated, but they had learned not to signal the need. They had learned that showing need does not get a response.
Others, the ones whose mothers had been inconsistently responsive, sometimes warm, sometimes not, were extremely distressed by the separation. And when their mother returned, they could not settle. They went to her and then pushed her away, cried and then resisted comfort. They were angry and relieved at the same time because they had learned that the person they needed most was also unpredictable. And that is an unbearable combination.
Then looking at who were most able to explore, to venture out, to be genuinely curious and engaged with the world, those turned out to be the securely attached babies, the ones whose mothers had been mostly consistently responsive. They would go further, they would try more, they would recover faster because they had a solid foundation to leave from.
The strange situation has been replicated hundreds of times in dozens of countries across multiple decades. The pattern holds. The securely attached child, the child who's been held, responded to, consistently present with, becomes more curious, more resilient, more willing to engage with the world. The less securely attached child is more clingy, more anxious, more likely to stay close because the ground under them has never felt solid enough to leave.
And the children who struggle most with independence are not the ones who were held too much. They're the ones who were never held enough to trust that it was safe to let go.
The strange situation tells us about babies, but the most compelling research comes from the studies that follow these children not just through infancy, but through childhood, adolescence, and into adulthood.
The most significant of these is the Minnesota longitudinal study of risk and adaptation. It was begun in the 1970s by a developmental psychologist named Alan Sroufe and his colleagues at the University of Minnesota. They enrolled over 200 families with newborns and followed them for decades into adulthood. It was one of the longest running attachment studies ever conducted, and the findings were extraordinary.
The children who had been securely attached as infants were, as they grew up, more competent socially. They had closer friendships. They handled conflict better. They were more empathic towards others. In school, they were better able to concentrate and learn because their regulatory systems had been built on a solid foundation. And they could use those systems to manage demands in school and in life.
As adolescents, they were more likely to have stable relationships with peers, less likely to be aggressive or withdrawn, more likely to seek help when they needed it, which it turns out is one of the clearest markers of actual independence. Knowing when you need support and being willing to ask for it is a skill. It requires both self-awareness and trust, and it shows up far more in securely attached people than in insecurely attached ones.
More long-term attachment research revealed more remarkable findings. Securely attached individuals consistently exhibited strong moral principles, empathy, and pro-social behavior. This ethical foundation is driven by a heightened capacity for compassion and balanced emotional regulation. Studies have shown significantly higher compassion and a greater likelihood to behave ethically when faced with challenging or competitive tasks.
Most relevant to this question we started with today, they were more likely to take appropriate risks, to try new things that might fail, to pursue goals that require sustained effort in the face of setbacks. They were more independent.
The pattern in the long-term research data is consistent and clear. Secure attachment in infancy does not create adults who need to be constantly given validation, attention, and praise. It creates adults who know how to stand on moral principles and standards.
So the question was, does attachment parenting create dependent children? The data from 60 years of research says that children who were raised with consistent closeness and responsiveness grew up to be more independent, more capable, and more resilient than those who were not.
Measurably and significantly more, across different countries, different cultures, and across generations of families that these studies have now tracked. The direction of the evidence is consistent.
Now we'd like to focus on the word resilience. It's used a lot in these conversations, and it tends to get used to mean something that is not what it actually means.
Resilience used to mean the ability to handle hardship without needing support, toughness, self-sufficiency, and the ability to keep on going alone. But that is not what the research shows resilience to be at all.
Researchers who study resilience, who study people who have faced genuine adversity and come out of it transformed and strengthened, find something very consistent. Resilient people are the ones who've had more support. The single most predictive factor for resilience in the face of hardship is the presence of at least one stable, caring relationship with an adult in early childhood. Real resilience is having a safety net, reliable enough that you develop internal resources from it, resources you carry with you even when you're far from the net.
The people who walk into hard situations and handle them well are not the ones whose needs were ignored when they were young. They are the people who are given enough so that they had something to draw from. This is one of the places where the cultural message and the scientific findings are most dramatically opposed. We've been told that resilience builds from being pushed toward independence early. The research shows it comes from being held securely first. There is a specific confusion at the heart of this question that we'd like to address.
The confusion makes us mix up two completely different things: meeting emotional needs, holding a baby who needs to be held, responding to a child who's distressed, being reliably present. That's one thing. And giving a child everything they want, satisfying every preference, never allowing them to experience frustration or disappointment, that's something else entirely. Those are not the same thing. They're not even close to the same thing. And the fact that we have been treating them as if they were, as if holding your baby and never saying no to your teenager are the same impulse on the same spectrum, that confusion has done real damage.
A child whose emotional needs have been consistently met, who's been held, responded to, seen, and known, that child develops an internal reservoir of security. And it's from that reservoir that they're able to tolerate frustration, to hear no, to wait, to try again, to manage disappointment without falling apart.
Because the no does not threaten the foundation. The foundation is solid. They can stand on it even when things don't go their way.
The child who's been deprived of emotional responsiveness is the one who struggles with frustration, because frustration without a foundation feels like a free fall and cannot be tolerated for long.
We're not advocating for parenting without limits. Limits are essential. Boundaries are how children learn about the structure of the world. We're saying that limits come from a position of strength when the relationship underneath them is secure, and they come from a position of desperation when it's not.
What research shows is that the cycle of secure attachment looks like this: attunement, disruption, and repair, in that order. And the repair is as important as the attunement. Attunement means you're in sync. You see what your child needs and you respond to it. That is the ideal, and it happens in good enough parenting, maybe 30% of the time. Disruption means you miss, you're distracted, exhausted, you misread the signal, or you lose your patience. You say something you wish you hadn't said. This constantly in everyone's parenting without exception.
And repair means you come back. You notice what happened. You go back to your child and you say, in whatever way fits them and you, I wasn't there in the way I wanted to be. I'm here now, and I'm sorry. That repair, that willingness to come back after a rupture is one of the most powerful things a parent can do, not just for the relationship, but for what the child learns about relationships in general.
Children who experience repair learn that relationships survive hard moments, that love does not disappear when things go wrong, that people who care about each other can hurt each other and then find their way back. That is not a small lesson. That might be the most important lesson of childhood.
We both have done things in our parenting that we would do differently now. We both lost our patience, said the wrong thing, been less present than we wanted to be, and we both have gone back. We have apologized to our children. We've said, that was mine, not yours. Showing our children that adults make mistakes and repair them is not a weakness. It's the most honest thing we can model, because they will make mistakes too, and we want them to know what to do next.
You may be a parent who wants the full scientific picture, because we know that for many of you, the question is not, does this feel right? The question is, show me the data.
So here it is briefly. The attachment research we're drawing from includes the original Strange Situation Studies by Mary Ainsworth, published across the 1960s and 70s, the Minnesota Longitudinal Study, begun by Alan Sroufe and continuing for decades, and the meta-analyses by researchers like Mary Main, who extended Bowlby's work into adult attachment, studies by Jerome Kagan on temperament and attachment, cross-cultural replications in Germany, Japan, Israel, China, and across Latin America, showing that the secure base effect holds across very different cultural contexts.
This is not alternative parenting philosophy dressed up in scientific language. Attachment theory is one of the most empirically supported frameworks in all of developmental psychology. The intervention programs that have shown the greatest success in improving child outcomes, home visiting programs, early childhood education programs, parenting support programs across Europe and the Americas are almost universally grounded in attachment principles.
If you want to go deeper into any one of these studies, we list them in our book with context and explanation written for parents, not academics. We've spent 30 years translating the research into language that families can actually use. That is what Criar con el corazón is for.
We want to do something practical for a few minutes because we're aware that all of this can sound very abstract, and attachment parenting, like any framework, only matters if it translates into real life.
So what does a securely attached child actually look like at different ages? Not in a research paper, in a kitchen, at a playground, at school.
At 2 years old, they have tantrums. Of course they do. Tantrums are not a sign of insecure attachment. They're a sign of a 2-year-old brain that cannot yet manage big emotions. The difference is in what happens during and after the tantrum. A securely attached 2-year-old, when their parents stay calm and close during the meltdown, tends to recover faster because the co-regulation is working. The parent's nervous system is helping to regulate theirs.
At 5, they start school, and the securely attached 5-year-old, who may well cry on the first day, which is completely fine, is more likely to engage with the new environment, to make friends, to approach a teacher when they need help. But because the internal working model they carry says, I'm okay, the world is generally safe. New things can be explored.
And at 10, they're navigating social complexity, friendships that fall apart, teachers who are unfair, failure in something they cared about. The securely attached 10-year-old is more likely to come home and talk about it, not to be protected from it, but to process it with someone, because they've learned that talking about hard things helps, because that was modeled for them from the beginning.
At 15, they push back. They disagree. They want their own life. And this is exactly right. This is a developmental task of adolescence, and a healthy relationship should be able to hold it. The securely attached teenager does not necessarily agree with their parents, but they come back. They maintain the relationship even through the tension because the foundation was built on solid enough to withstand disagreement.
None of these children or families are without difficulty. None of them are perfect. Secure attachment is not a shield from the hard parts of growing up, but it is a foundation, an internal set of tools and beliefs that make the hard parts more manageable. That is all it is, and that is everything.
So, does attachment parenting create dependent children?
No, it does not. The research is clear. The evidence covers 6 decades, multiple countries, and thousands of families, and it points in one direction.
Children who are raised with consistent emotional responsiveness, who are held, seen, responded to, and allowed to return to a reliable base. Those children grow into adults who are more independent, more resilient, more empathetic, ethical, and capable of intimacy.
You cannot give a child too much genuine love, but you can give them too little. And the difference shows up inevitably in who they become.
The fear that closeness creates weakness, that fear itself, the legacy of a century of bad advice, of Watson and his predecessors and successors, of a culture that confused emotional needs with weakness and responsiveness with permissiveness. We are here to offer something different, and science supports this.
Remember that now you can find the book, Criar con el corazón, in Amazon. Visit our website and listen to the free gift audiobook. The links are below.
Next week, we're going to talk about where our own parenting came from. The things we were taught, the things we had to unlearn, the cycles we tried to break, and the ones that caught us anyway, and what we hope our children and grandchildren carry into their own families.
Thank you for being here.